Hi viewers, this is Nathan. I'm bringing you a video about reloading. I'm not an expert on reloading. I've been doing it for under a year now. I've only reloaded about 1,000 rounds, not very much. So what I wanted to do was bring you a video about some of the things I've learned though. If you're someone considering reloading and trying to weigh out time, money, the money to get into it, whether or not it'll save you money, some of those things. I want to maybe offer a few thoughts on that, but I really wanted to try to share a few things that I learned that I didn't necessarily hear on a bunch of the other videos that are on YouTube. There's a ton of information out there, so I'm not going to try to be redundant with some of that stuff. I really wanted to try to just share a few thoughts about my experience. So I do feel like I made a good choice in deciding to take up reloading. I was already considering it before some of the craziness happened, so I was pretty well committed, and then seeing things, the weather as it were, kind of change, it only reinforced my thoughts, and I'm glad I did it. It has allowed me to do a couple things: save some money for sure, and also go out and shoot whenever I want, to continue to train basically without having to constantly be chasing ammo and running to the stores and calling all the stores and who's got it and when do they have it and when's the next shipment, and probably a lot of the same hurdles that some of you other shooters are experiencing. So what I did is, during my first year of shooting, I policed my brass because I knew reloading was a potential option for me. So you can see I've got brass in various stages here. I've got stuff that's already been cleaned, stuff I'm currently working with. It's all either been once fired. I don't really use any new brass, again, because I'm trying to save money by using my brass that I already paid for essentially. And I do have some range pickups that I incorporated in this. I don't shoot at an actual range, just at a pit. So just when somebody goes out and decides they want to leave the stuff behind, I capitalize on it. I've also got some other stuff that's been fired twice, so you got to think about sorting your brass, keeping track of its condition. Essentially, it's it's plays into the safety of it. So yeah, I went with as far as an actual press, I went with Lee Classic Turret Press. I got the whole kit, which came with the the primer feeding system and the powder scale and the auto disc powder measure, all that kind of stuff. Then you have to buy the actual die set. So this is not like a Dillon 650 and some of these other really high-end expensive machines. It's middle of the pack, or maybe someone would argue the lower end of the pack. But I've been great. I feel like it's worked great for me. It was something I could afford. Essentially my buyback was going to be in a shorter amount of time than getting something that was like a Dillon 650 or more. And I also had to consider my lifestyle. So if you're somebody who's going to be able to sit down and spend hours and hours reloading in a single block of time, then maybe a progressive press is a better option for you. Or if you're going to, you got to consider your needs. If you're someone who's going to go shoot 1,000 rounds a weekend, then I would definitely consider a progressive press, and probably a very expensive machine at that because of the quantity. For me, I don't have the time to do that. So I'm loading a box at a time. My lifestyle affords me the opportunity to grab 20 minutes and reload. So I hop in and things are set up right now and crank out a box and consider it done and stash it away. Maybe I get out this weekend, maybe I don't, and then I just dip into the store, the storage of bullets that I've got. So that was my thought with this. It served me well. The only problem I've had with it was my actual shell holder on the bottom there. I had one of those. This is my second one. Now Lee contacted me within hours of the email inquiry that I sent in with photos, and they said there'd be one in the mail the next day. It was, and I had a new one 3 days afterwards or something like that. It was like 2 days overnight or something like that. So props to Lee for their customer service, 100% on that. So something else I wanted to talk about that I don't hear a lot of people, give as much credit to, I guess, is the idea of the amount of time that goes into setting up the dies. I feel like people talk about it being fairly easy, but if you're new and you're literally following the out-of-box instructions, it takes a lot of time, because you have to work your round essentially through and make sure all that you're within the safe tolerances and limits that the recipes, that your load data calls for. And it takes a little while to kind of get used to, well, how does the die work? People describe it, but it's another thing to actually just go out and do it. So if you're a hands-on person, recognize that setting up your die is going to take some time, and then you need to go test your loads. I've read people, hey, loaded my first 500 rounds, I can't wait to go test them. if you've got problems in your first 15 rounds, then you're going to be pulling a ton of bullets. So just load a few and then go out and shoot them and come back. For me, again, with the Lee machinery, I don't know if it's because I'm working with tight group and it just doesn't meter well. Tight group, the powder, if it doesn't meter well through Lee's setup here, but it's not quite as consistent as I might want. Either that or the scale's maybe not quite as consistent, but there is a variation there. So if I was doing precision loads for like a rifle, maybe this powder setup wouldn't be the one I'd really want to use. But for pistol, it really doesn't make that big a difference. So, but just recognize that you don't want to, especially if you're the first time through and you're learning, don't rush this setup. Take your time. Make sure you understand what you're doing and you're really learning about what you're doing. Something else I want to mention too is lube. So Lee sends you this. This goes on your brass. It's supposed to make it easier on the actual machinery. I've read people say, well, don't use that because it gums up your gun and makes everything all trashy, and then it collects dirt, grit, and everything else. Then you've got a wear problem. Well, I don't know. I'm kind of running the middle of the road. I've found that if I have enough casings lubed up for me to be able to do like 1 out of every 3, then it keeps things running smooth. You can definitely recognize how much effort you have to put into this and what it feels like actually entering and exiting the die when things are not lubed, or dry versus lubed. So for me, I am incorporating some lube into what I'm doing. Let's see here. Components now become the thing that you're chasing. This isn't really often talked about in some of the videos. You're not trying to find that like magical box at Walmart or wherever you're trying to get your ammo from anymore, which is nice. You have ammo on hand, but you are still trying to pursue the components. So you're trying to look for deals now on your bullets. Brass, again, depending on where you're trying to find that, locally or online. Primers, powder. In my experience right now, the bullets seem to be pretty easy to find. Powder seems to be one of the trickier pieces to find. Primers I've found have been readily available. Again, I'm up in Maine, southern Maine, so your mileage may vary. But it does take, you're still scouting for parts, but what's nice is when you buy something, you're buying them like 1,000 at a time, rather than box 100, 200, 200 rounds, whatever you're trying to, the store will allow you to buy essentially, and then it's gone. So taking up reloading has definitely allowed me to go out and shoot more frequently. I'm loading for somewhere around 17 cents, I think, around right now, and that's definitely beating market pricing on the 9mm that I'm reloading. Cleaning brass, there are some videos about kind of the vinegar, laundry detergent, salt recipe, that kind of thing. I've tried that. It did work pretty good. I think it worked fine to run it through your press. The one thing I would add that I've never heard anyone mention is like don't leave it in the solution too long, because you will start to get some corrosion of the brass and some deterioration. So don't leave it overnight and say, I'll finish that project tomorrow morning, because you're starting to eat into the brass. So that'd be one thing I'd make note of for you guys. And then also like built-in safety checks. If you buy expensive presses, they've got built-in safeties on primers and on the powder and everything like that to prevent things like a double charge. I just had to kind of develop my own system so that I knew that things were going to run smoothly. Just to give you guys kind of an example, I guess. So obviously you're checking out your brass during your cleaning process, and then once you go ahead and you actually remove the primer, you have the option of whether or not to clean out that primer cup with the tool that Lee will send you. I don't think it's really necessary. Maybe if you got some really dirty brass, it'd be worth it. But if you're just doing plinking around, it's not really necessary. But essentially what I do is, so I've checked my brass, I go through and then I insert, I dump my powder in. My first check's just going to make sure my powder level looks consistent and I'm not getting a double charge. That's my first safety check, second safety check. And then drop my bullet in, I seat my bullet. I've already checked my overall length of the round with a set of calipers. It's additional equipment you guys are going to need. And then I get my crimp on that at the end. And then what I do is when I go and place that back in the box when I'm done with it, I just drag my finger across the top of that, and you can tell whether or not a primer's seated as it needs to be. or if it's sticking up. And that's my last check. And then what I'll do when I'm done with an actual box is I'll go through and just give it a visual one more time, make sure I didn't miss anything, that I didn't pass over something too hastily. Because that primer depth is key, as well as the powder. The other things like the bullet seating, that's taken care of by testing with the calipers. And again, so what I'll do is every now and then I'll check and make sure my powder's dropping like it's supposed to be according to my load data. And then I'll check my overall length. I'll grab 3 or 4 out of a box every now and then and make sure that I'm still within the limits that I want to be. But build those in and you'll be fine operating this, and you will be safe as long as you're being smart about it. So those are just a few things that are been in my experience, and like I said, I don't hear some of those things mentioned on the other videos that I've listened to. Go ahead and fire away questions. If it's something I can respond to, then Carp or I will get back to you on it. Otherwise, stay safe. I think reloading is a great choice if you're willing to invest the time and do it wisely. So we'll catch you guys around.